Hello, hello. Welcome to all of you who are here already. We have a larger registration, so for now, we're just going to wait a few more minutes before we get started, but we thank you for being timely, being here on time for this presentation. But we're going to go ahead and wait for just a couple of more minutes and then get started, all right? So thank you again. Okay, so to be respectful of your time and everyone's time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And as people come in, I guess they can catch up a little bit on what's going on. All right. So first of all, welcome to PEPSA's regional training. My name is Lourdes Quiñones. I am the program coordinator for PEPSA, which stands for the Partnership for Effective Programs for Students with Autism. Professionally, I'm a pediatric physical therapist, as well as a doctoral candidate here at the College of Education at USF, curriculum and instruction, with an emphasis on special education. We are so proud to have today Dr. Diehl, Sylvia Diehl, presenting for you the Integrating the Language and Complexities of Theory of Mind, Central Coherence and Executive Functioning, Challenges to Improve Reading Comprehension. But before we introduce her and get her started, I am going to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about the host of this presentation, PEPSA, and tell you a little bit of what we do. So first of all, PEPSA is an initiative that helps support educators and school professional development efforts, and is funded by the Florida Department of Education, K through 12 public schools, Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services, BEES, and we were founded in 1999. So we've been around quite a bit. And the way we achieve our mission to support educators and schools' professional development effort is that in partnership with the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, CARD, PEPSA provides free regional trainings throughout the year and in various forms. Some of the forms that we provide that include, first of all, the PEPSA-Partnership program, which I will tell you a little bit more about. It's a collaboration between CARD and PEPSA, as well as statewide and regional trainings and conferences. So, for example, the annual CARD conference in January is one of the ways, the conferences we support. Through the PEPSA Day, what is known as PEPSA Day, or the pre-conference day at their conference, and the summer training events such as the Autism Summer Institutes that all 7 centers of CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, provide throughout the year. This one is one of them. So this one is being sponsored by USF, the University of South Florida. And in regards to the partnership program, I'll just take a second to let you know that the partnership program, again, is a collaboration between CARD centers and PEPSA. And what we do is we pair up an educator, an administrator, a school staff, related support staff, to be able to mentor them through the action research process or teacher inquiry, also known as that. Anyway, and the way that we do that is we pair you up with a CARD consultant who is an autism specialist. And what they do is they provide the information, assist you through the teacher-led inquiry that is specific to your classroom, schools, or programs. And then what we provide is consultation, technical assistance regarding the best evidence-based practices that have been proven to work and be effective with students with autism. There's many perks, including financial perks for the educators, participation in the conference, and being able to build your leadership skills. So if you want more information, we'll be glad to share some information that in the chat for the application process as well as at the end. All right. So with no hold back now, I will introduce to you some of the details about today and today's presentation, and then my colleague Beatrice will be introducing herself as well as how our wonderful speaker has excelled throughout the years, okay? So first of all, we are going to be handling questions at the end of natural pauses throughout Dr. Diehl's presentation. The way you will manage those is if you have questions, please be sure to jot them down for yourself as well as on the Q&A section. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see it says Q&A and it has some like speech boxes. You will enter your questions there. We will hold off until the natural pauses and present those to Dr. Diehl, who will gladly take your answers, your questions there and answer them. And then as well as at the end of the presentation, she will have more time for you to ask questions you may not have gotten a chance to put in. Also, please use the chat to communicate among yourselves, to ask questions related to maybe technical issues or anything like that. So 2 different chat boxes. One is for Q&A, and the other one is just chatting with the rest of the participants. So I'll move it on now to our colleague, Beatrice, who will introduce herself again and then introduce Dr. Diehl. Thank you.
Thank you, Lourdes. I am Beatrice Buck. I'm the Program Planner Analyst here with PEPSA, and thank you again for joining us tonight. We're more than honored to welcome Dr. Sylvia Diehl to share her wealth of knowledge with us tonight. Dr. Sylvia Diehl is retired from the University of South Florida's Department of Communication Sciences in Tampa, Florida, where she taught Augmentative and Alternative Communication, Pediatric Language, Research, and Autistic Disorders, and was the Director of Language and Phonology Services. She now teaches Autism and Social Communication at the University of St. Augustine for Behavioral Sciences. She has a long history of clinical experience, including public school settings, university settings, and clinical settings. She consults for school systems and conducts workshops locally, nationally, and internationally. She has authored numerous journal articles and book chapters, along with numerous continuous education courses for Medbridge Education and the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association. So thank you again for joining us, Dr. Diehl. I will let you go ahead and get started.
Well, thank you so much, Beatrice. And thank all of you for taking your time to really get your knowledge up to speed with the children we all love. Some of what we're going to do tonight is new, and some of what we're going to do has been around a while. But I think all of this reflects the current state of research in theory of mind and executive functioning to improve reading comprehension. So tonight is the groundwork, but it's really important because in order to make those connections in what you're doing and really make a great fit with your students, then you have the background knowledge to make those kinds of decisions. And that's what this is all about tonight. So we're going to do 3 major things. We're going to look at the simple view of reading, but not just what it is, but also what does the research say affects the most in reading comprehension in that simple view of reading. Secondly, we're going to look at overall reading profiles. And then we're going to look at each of the three theory of mind, central coherence, which now is sometimes either split up and given to theory of mind and executive functioning, or sometimes people still refer to it to central coherence. I kept it in because I think it points out some of the problems that we see in reading comprehension is worth just spending a little bit of time about it. Okay, so first, the simple view of reading is not so simple for our kids with autism or autistic kids, depending on your view of neurodiversity at this time, which is a whole nother lecture. All right, so let's take the simple view of reading and look at the effects of reading when something is weaker or stronger. So we do know that that reading comprehension is directly predicted by two things. One is your ability to word read, right? And the other one is your ability to have reading comprehension. And reading comprehension is directly predicted by word reading and listening comprehension skills. After that, the simple view of reading just isn't so simple. This is what's called the DIER model, which is the direct and indirect effects of reading, is what the DIER stands for. And it lets you know a little bit about how the brain brings this all together. What we know about children with autism is when we read, our whole brain is just lit up on fire, right? Our visual cortex in the back of our brain is lit up because we're using our vision, right? Our language sections are also lit up because we're reading actually words and sentences. And then whatever the content is, those experiences and background knowledge are lit up in all the other parts of the brain. So when you watch a brain as it's reading, all of them are activated. However, when you look at a brain, an autistic brain, that same map looks a little different. The visual cortex down here is definitely lit up. It's ready. And some connections to the language areas of the brain, but you see very little connections to other things. So that's what we're going to talk about a lot tonight, because when we think of autism, we think of functional connectivity. And that's exactly what we're seeing in our reading comprehension, is that those things that are simple and direct, like word reading, those get lit up and ready to go quickly. However, those things like listening comprehension that are much more complex and require multiple pathways to be ignited are not as well used. Doesn't mean we can't do something about it. And that's the exciting part, is that intervention, reading comprehension intervention, really works. And we have solid evidence of that. So that helps me get up in the morning, truthfully. So let's take first word reading, working memory, vocabulary, and morphosyntax all contribute to decoding ability. Now, what I see sometimes is children only read by visually memorizing the word, but then other times I see children using some of their language knowledge, their morphology, their syntax to get things going. So when we're talking about working memory, Working memory is needed when a child sounds out the word, if they go act, and then can't remember what they just sounded out, they'll never word blend the cat, the whole word. So that adds to decoding ability. From there, let's think about vocabulary. Vocabulary helps you recognize the word automatically if you can chunk it together and recognize the word. And lastly, the morphosyntax, which is morphology, which is the word endings and prefixes and suffixes, and the syntax, which is the grammar of our language, allows the children to kind of divide or parse out those words and decode longer and more complex words. So this means that working memory, vocabulary, and morphosyntax indirectly contribute to reading comprehension through word reading. Any questions about that? Just the word reading part. Okay, let's move on to, whoop, sorry, I did this without going to the slide. That's all right. So we went over word reading, well, working memory, where you store and you manipulate information. You remember what you're sounding out, what words were read, how it goes with a sentence structure, and then update this as reading progresses. The vocabulary helps you recognize the word in written form from oral language. And often you see my daughter, who's now ironically was an English teacher and now a principal, had dyslexia and didn't really read fluently until she was almost in 4th grade. But what I would see is she had this fantastic expressive vocabulary orally, but because she didn't read for pleasure yet, because it was so difficult for her, her recognition of words she knew in her oral language, she didn't recognize in written form. I also see the opposite sometimes in students with autism when they recognize it in written form, but really don't know how to pronounce it orally. Lastly, the morphosyntax, which we said, the prefixes, the suffixes, and the sentence structure. So now that was kind of straightforward. Now we get to the components impacted by listening comprehension. And what that means, if you have poor inferencing, then your listening comprehension is going to be low. If you have poor vocabulary, then your listening comprehension is going to be low. So these are the things that directly impact your listening comprehension. And listening comprehension and language ability directly predict reading comprehension. So let's first look at working memory. Verbal working memory helps store and update as you're reading. So not only does it help with decoding, but it also helps with your content and your understanding of what's happening. Oh, that person we just saw is so-and-so's husband. Oh, I see that person then is their child. So we're not only using our working memory to decode, we're also using our working memory to keep constant with what's happening in the story or the instructions or whatever you're reading. Morphosyntax, the morphological and syntactic knowledge, helps us with complex words, with sentences to get the right tense, all of that knowledge that you get from grammar and morphology. Comprehension monitoring means we all know that a good reader monitors their meaning as they are reading. So they continue to read and go, oh no, whoops, I don't know that word. Let me look it up. Let me see if I can infer the meaning from the context. And then if, you know, I read all those words, but I really didn't get the meaning, let me go back and start over. A good reader always monitors their comprehension, and the research shows this over and over again. This is also an area that is difficult for autistic children. Inferencing. Inferencing is probably the biggest area of challenging. It's the ability to connect information, connecting information not just with your text, but also connecting information with your background knowledge. So the other part about it is if we're listening, we're also connecting with the context of where we are. So that inferencing ability greatly influences our listening comprehension. I have a young man that I'm working with right now, and he's just amazing. He's 16, and his reading comprehension was stay 9-1, almost nothing. I think he got nothing right on the reading comprehension. And what I realized through our discussions is he had a really rich background in lots of things. He went with his mother to many things. So he would get a few content words out of what he was reading, and then he would make up what the story was about from his background knowledge. And in this case, he was not getting the information or connecting the information within a text. He was just grabbing a couple of words. So we worked very strongly on thinking in language, really thinking in language, and did lots of analogies and things like that. And in less than 3 months, his reading comprehension jumped a stay 9.5, which almost never happens. But reading comprehension is something that really pays off with pretty intensive reading therapy, reading work. So what we know is that the ability to connect information is particularly hard when you've already finished something for this population. So if you go as you're connecting as you go along, they're going to connect their background knowledge a little bit better. But if you read until they're already finished with the story, which happens in most classrooms, you know, read this short story on this page and then you have a discussion, that's more difficult. Inferencing is more difficult at that point. It's also more difficult when there are emotional, mental, or social inferences, because it directly impacts theory of mind, which we're going to talk about in much more detail in a little while. So the last thing that goes into leading comprehension is theory of mind. And that's understanding that other people have other minds. So if you think about a thought bubble coming out of everyone's head and understanding that, you know, they think differently than you do or have a different perspective or a different knowledge, that's theory of mind. And we'll talk more about that as we go on. And so the ability to know that other people have mental states and emotional states really impacts our reading comprehension, particularly in the areas of character perspective, of emotions, for the motivation of the problem of the story, things like that. So as you can see, the simple view of reading, not so simple. There are so many contributions made and variables made in putting this all together. So let's do a quick true or false. If a child can decode well, then his reading comprehension will follow. I see this all the time. Teachers and reading texts will say, oh, well, if they can read fluently, their reading comprehension will follow. Although people's definition of reading fluently can be different, right? So think to yourself, do you think that's true or false? In my mind, because I work with this population so frequently, I see many children who can decode quite well, but their reading comprehension is very poor. So I would say this is false. I'll give you a great example. I had a two-year-old little tiny, a gorgeous little girl who could read the New York Times. But if I patted her on her knee, she would go pants, because that's what I was patting her knee on. So her comprehension was certainly not at the New York Times level. The other thing that I see as far as fluency is concerned is that children with autism often read until they run out of breath. So they keep going and going and going and going and going and going and going, and then they pause because they've run out of breath. Whereas when we read, we parse it into semantic units, so it makes sense, and we're pausing when things kind of coalesce and go to a next subject. They often don't look at commas and periods, and because that's visual, that's a great way for them to start learning how to parse their words and their decoding together into semantic groups. Okay, let's look at number 2. Working memory helps with decoding as well as content. Well, we think back on the simple view of reading. Remember, we had working memory working for decoding and sounding out. And then we had working memory working to self-monitor and know what's going on in the story. So to me, that is true. Number 3, inferencing just means connecting, reading. Oops, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I placed my phone on my space bar. That was very nice. Oh my goodness. Okay, number 3, before I got so rudely interrupted by my phone. Inferencing just means connecting reading to personal background. Remember Judah's story where he had a great background information, but he really didn't get the information that the text had to give him. So that's very important that we have inferencing, not just from our background information, but also to what the text actually means. And if we're inferencing in oral information, then we also have the context. Are you at school? Who are you talking to? All of those kinds of things. So to me, that is false. Number 4, comprehension monitoring is a skill seen in good readers. We talked just a few seconds about that. So that is true. People that consciously check themselves, did they understand that as they're reading, are usually your best readers. Last, theory of mind has a lot to do with word reading or decoding. That's false. Theory of mind has to do with the mental ability to know that people have separate minds. And so that would be less about decoding and more about listening comprehension. All right. So that is just our kind of European tour through the simple view of reading and the effects that we know impair reading comprehension. Do you have any questions about that?
At this point, we don't have any questions.
Okay. That's kind of background, so I wouldn't expect a bunch of questions at that point. So that's good. But if you do think of one as we're moving along, just jot it down. All right. So now we're going to look at the cognitive issues that may challenge reading comprehension for children with ASD. For those of you who have a neurodiverse point, autistic children. I'm going to say children with ASD because that is the more accepted for academics at this point in time, but it doesn't reflect my personal views. All right, so we have language, that big blue circle, right, in our Venn diagram, and then the complexity of language is really, really important. Is language in a complex setting, context, even in how the book is presented? Is it in very small print? Does it have a lot of pictures? All of those kinds of things. So within the language, we have executive functioning, theory of mind, and central coherence. The overarching theme of all of these is complexity and language. I'm not sure what was supposed to be in that circle, but that's okay. I want you to think constantly about functional connectivity and how important it is that we are flexibly connecting information in our lives and in our reading, and how we comprehend what is happening. This is where you're going to find the stumbling blocks that children with autism have in reading comprehension. So social situations very definitely are impacted by this functional connectivity, because as I mentioned in the inferencing part, inferencing involves the knowledge of all your vocabulary. It involves, if you want to get a joke, you have to know idioms. You have to know where you are contextually, because a joke in church would be a different a joke in school or a joke in class. All of those would be different. So social situations are so difficult. I have had the pleasure of having many children under my care now become adults and professionals, and I'm so proud of them. But many times they are still struggling with social situations. I have a young lady who I absolutely adore, and she's just graduating from high school, thinking about where she wants to go to college. But she always complains to me that she has lots of friends, people that know her, but she doesn't have a best friend. She doesn't have someone who she knows she can go to anytime. And that's what she really would like to cultivate. And we're trying, she's getting closer. And then secondly, we have multiple inferences. There are emotional inferences, right? How is someone feeling? You know, I always think of Sheldon on Big Bang Theory, where he would go angry, right? And then he'd go, yes, I got it, which totally kind of negated the fact that he figured out he was angry, because he was happy because he got the inference, right? We have mental inferences, what people know, what people remember, and social kinds of connections between people that you're supposed to know. I remember when my girls were in middle school, they just constantly talked about who liked who and who you could, you know, we were having a party and who could they invite. No, they couldn't invite him because he dated Grace and Grace no longer likes him. It was quite elaborate. And then the length of a NAFRA. A NAFRA is not a commonly used word, but what it means is basically the pronoun reference. So the longer it is, so let's say, for instance, Harry got a new shirt. He really liked his red shirt. So he is the next sentence. That would be an easier way for a child with autism to understand that Harry and he are the same person. But a NAFRA is really very problematic. And the longer away the referent is, the Harry is, from the he, the she, the it, or whatever, the harder it is for an autistic child to connect in that way. In fact, anaphoric reference is one of the research-based interventions that we're going to talk about. Scientific vocabulary, much more difficult for older students because they would not have had a lot of knowledge. They would have to have good morphosyntactic knowledge to try and figure that out. My little guy, who we really worked on thinking in language, really didn't know that bi was 2, tri was 3. So scientific vocabulary in that setting was really difficult for him. And I think the research in the last maybe 5 or 6 years really focuses on the importance of morphology and what we need to do to beef that up in our struggling reading comprehension. If you have significant language impairment, functional connectivity is also difficult because you're processing slower, because you're seeing different associations. When we have significant language impairment, it directly impacts reading comprehension. And we see reading comprehension being predicted by oral language. So that's really one of the strongest predictors of reading comprehension. Text reading fluency takes quite a bit of functional connectivity if you do it well. That doesn't mean reading multisyllabic words as fast as you can and then taking a breath, right? Expressive vocabulary versus receptive vocabulary, we talked about that. You may know it in your oral language, but not know it in your written language, and vice versa. That's less common, however. Okay, so here's something that
Dr.
I
Diehl?
asked. Yes.
I'm sorry, we do have a question before we move
Okay.
on.
Great.
Yeah, so this has to do with, the reading is from Giovanni Venetico. I hope I didn't kill that too much. So Giovanni asks, would reading questions before reading a text help with comprehension? Maybe this would be helpful with what to look for in a text.
Yes, that's and as we get further into intervention, I think that's even a strategy that I give. What that does is prime the brain on what to look for. The same thing with vocabulary words. If you review important vocabulary words before you start reading, this has been in the learning disability literature for quite some time, and it's shown to really help reading comprehension in the classroom, is let them read the questions before they read the material. So that's a great idea. I love
Excellent. Excellent. So that's it for now.
All righty. So we were talking about what impact do we have? Can intervention actually change this innervation, these pathways, this functional connectivity? And the answer is yes. This study is particularly interesting. they used fMRI in a longitudinal study over time to look at reading intervention and the connectivity of brain regions on reading comprehension in autistic children. So there were 31 children with autistic spectrum disorder, 22 age and IQ match children, and I'm sorry, I have to move this. Age and IQ match typically developing children. So the mean age was from 5 to 10. So they used visualizing and verbalizing for language comprehension and thinking, which is called VV intervention. And it's based on the use of nonverbal sensory input in the form of imaged gestalts. And we'll talk about that when we get to intervention, to develop oral reading comprehension, to establish vocabulary, and develop higher order thinking skills. It was very intensive reading, 4-hour sessions per day, 5 days a week for 10 weeks. So this was not something we'd be able to do in the school system, but it really showed that intensive intervention actually changed those pathways. The reading comprehension significantly improved according to the GORT-4 comprehension subtest. Not your best, but a good indication. Widespread and increased functional connectivity in the brains. So as they were looking at these brains, they were actually lighting up more, making those connections to background knowledge and all of those things in their post-tests than they were in the beginning. It really, really underlines that neuroplasticity of the brain. And it shows that the value of intensive reading intervention is so worthwhile. Because remember, this is longitudinal. So it wasn't just a one-hit, little intervention, test what you taught kind of thing. This is your actual brain connectivity changing. Yay. Okay. This is, let's talk a little bit about reading profiles. So there are autistic readers who are typical readers, who have good reading comprehension and good decoding. However, it's been my experience when I see that they test well on our comprehension tests, but if I dig a little deeper, I still see problems with theory of mind, kind of comprehension sneaking in, some executive functioning kinds of things sneaking in, but bravo for those kiddos. Then we have the second type, above average word reading. So they can read a word, no problem, decode words easily, but significantly lower reading comprehension. And I think this is probably what we come across often. And then we have the below average poor comprehender and below, poor decoder and below average comprehension. So they have really trouble with word reading and trouble with comprehension because of word reading and also because of their listening comprehension. So then the next one would be the mixed deficit, and that's when both are more than one at standard deviation below. A severe mixed deficit would be more than 1.5 standard deviation below average. So we see lots of profiles of autistic readers, but I do notice even with those who struggle with decoding, sometimes they can't read, but they'll know all their letters without being taught sometimes, or they have some kind of strength in decoding. Not all, of course, not all, but I see that often, that when there's below average, I'll see a little split even within those below averages. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the meat of what we're here to talk about. And we're going to talk about theory of mind first. So theory of mind is very simply the ability to comprehend and predict mental states, intentions, and emotions of others. So if I see someone crying, even though I'm in a hurry to tell them something exciting, I'm going to squelch my excitement and make sure that person is okay first, right? So I'm able to see that my mind is different, in a different state than their mind is. Carol Gray had this wonderful movie when she first started introducing social stories, and it had this young man in high school who had gone to an assembly of about 500 kids, and the speaker was talking about world change and how change over time was impacting them as up and coming younger adults. And this high schooler, autistic high schooler, had a lot of trouble with change. And so the assembly was a little difficult for him, and the transition was a little difficult. So he gets there and interrupts in front of other 500 other students by saying, there was a change in the schedule today, because he heard the word change from the speaker, and he was relating what was upsetting to him. So everyone really, really laughed, because here is this young man talking about the change in the schedule when the speaker was talking about change in society at large. So when Carol Gray was talking to him about it, she played the tape of him speaking, and then the kids laughing. And she asked him, I think his name was Eric, why are the other students laughing? And he replied, because they thought the same. They thought that interrupting the change in schedule was funny. So his theory of mind didn't allow him to see that other people were laughing because he interrupted the speaker. So early theory of mind really proposed this single construct that combined reading about both mental states and emotional states of yourself. And then it started to get more and more expanded, and it was quickly applied to autism, and Simon Baron-Cohen proposed it as unique to autistic children. Well, they found out that that's not true. It is not unique to autistic children, and in fact, it's more connected to ding, ding, ding language ability. So if you have a child who has hearing impairment and hasn't been exposed to a lot of language, either through signing or oral language, they will probably have trouble with theory of mind also. So now we know that it's more based on language ability, theory of mind ability is, than on just having autism. But it is certainly theory of mind difficulties are pervasive in autistic children. Okay, so we did find that theory of mind knowledge related to their scores on the ADOS, which we know is the gold standard for diagnosing autism and social communication, which would make sense, correct, from what we've talked about, but not on the restricted and repetitive behavior, which is the other category of the ADOS that helps us diagnose autism. So it's very tied to language and social communication. And believe it or not, theory of mind is becoming a predictor of reading comprehension in ASD. Any questions?
None right now.
All righty. I just ask as I go along.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. So social perspective taking is called lots of different things. Theory of mind, social cognition, mind reading, and mentalizing. You don't see mind reading and mentalizing as much anymore. Those are older terms. So the ability to know that other people have different perspectives than one's own. So for instance, in a kindergarten class, maybe they're all going to vote on what video they want to see. And the child with autism picks his video, and that wasn't what everyone else picked. He would be crushed and very upset that his vote wasn't what happened, because he doesn't have that group perspective that everyone's going to have different perspectives. So you have difficulty taking turns because they may not understand that you would like a turn also, right? So we know that first order theory of mind, very simple theory of mind, like taking turns, starts around 3 years of age. But in autistic children, doesn't often develop until 5 or 6. So good luck for those of you trying to teach taking turns with young elementary school children. They do learn because it becomes a routine, but you have to make it visual for them to understand it. So when I'm taking turns, I always put all of their names in a bag and pull them out so they understand that everybody's name comes out of is in the bag, and that's what determines their turn. And that helps quite a bit. Pretend play. Pretend play is very difficult. And it includes, you be the cashier, right? The role-playing part of it. You be the cashier, I'll be the customer, right? You be the pirate, I'll be Robin Hood. All of those kinds of pretend play, role-playing is very difficult because of not recognizing that people have other minds. Keeping secrets, knowing that the thoughts are private and that the speech is not. So thinking, using speech bubbles and thought bubbles helps with that so much. So if I tell you that the thought bubble is everything that's in your mind, and we write down what you're thinking, right? Then I can write down, show the thought bubble over my head and tell them what I'm thinking. That way they see the two different perspectives. Keeping secrets is very difficult, but every birthday my age was announced to the world at the clinic, which is fine because I don't really care. Humor, sarcasm, all of that so much involves oral language and solving the problem. So a lot of times jokes are meant on words that have more than one meaning. That's very difficult for them. Sarcasm means that they have to integrate your prosody. Wow, I did great on that test, right? With your words at the same time. And that's why early on, I always do singing with gesture. So you get both of those together and start those pathways going really, really early. So they end up with gesture and prosody from the singing and the comprehension from the words in the song. Making predictions, seeing what's going to come next. This is one of the reasons why children with autism have so much trouble transitioning from one thing to another, because they're not sure what's going to come. They're not making those normal predictions that we all make. That's why visual schedules are so helpful, because it allows them to know what's coming and what's expected. So important. Making inferences, we've talked quite a bit. Remorse. Many children get in more trouble for not having remorse than for what they did in the beginning. And that all goes back to theory of mind, right? So I had a young man who got a cookie every day of his life in his lunchbox. And the doctor said, well, he's starting to put on some weight and his cholesterol isn't good. Maybe you could cut out the cookies. Why he didn't say find some low-fat cookies, I don't know. But it was his habit to have a cookie after lunch. And that day, his mother left off the cookie. And so he went behind the lunch counter and grabbed a cookie. So I came in and he's sitting with the police who's telling him how he's going to be a lifelong criminal and stealing is bad. He has no idea what the guy is trying to tell him. He just knew he needed a cookie that time. So I kind of modeled for them what was wrong, what the problem was. I had to call mother, of course, to know the problem, but and then we planned what we should do better next time, and then he could do it, but without just telling him that the world's going to end if he steals, when he didn't really understand what he had done, wasn't going to do anything for him. Here we go. Okay, so now let's think about theory of mind constructs, and we can have cognitive theory of mind, and that's the thoughts, beliefs, and intentions of others. So it would be words like know, believe, remember, imagine, things you do with your mind. So therefore, it's cognitive theory of mind. And then on the other hand, we have affective theory of mind. And that's more about feelings, thinking about the emotions of others. So words like feel, like, value, adore, those feeling words that are part of understanding other people's perspectives and our own. So then that brings up, we have cognitive and affective, and it can be interpersonal, meaning do you understand it in others, and intrapersonal, do you understand it in yourself? So I know all of you have probably had children who could correct everyone in the class, but then they would do exactly the same thing. This would be a child who has good interpersonal of other things, but poor intrapersonal understanding. So let's look and practice that a little bit. So cognitive interpersonal. So pretend there's a sponge that looks just like a rock. And then the question might be, what will another kid say it is without touching it? So I'm putting my mind in another child's mind to say, what will they say without touching? And of course, if you have good theory of mind, you're going to say, they're going to say there's a rock, right? That would be interpersonal because you're talking about another kid. Cognitive intrapersonal, the sponge looks like a rock. I touch it and they say, what is the object really? And I say, oh, it's a sponge because I've touched it and I can feel that it's mushy, right? And then what did you think before you touched it? If you have good theory of mind, you're going to say, I thought it was a rock, right? Affective interpersonal. David falls and gets hurt. he tries to hide how he feels so he won't be laughed at by the other kids. So the questions might be, how does David really feel? So of course you would say, oh, he really is hurt and sad. How does he try to look on his face? And you would say happy, right? Does he look happy, sad, or okay? If he's successful, maybe he looks okay, right? Affective intrapersonal, so then that's within the child. You are playing and fall down in front of kids and hurt yourself. You try to hide so the other kids will not laugh at you. How do you feel when this happens, right? So you feel sad. How do you try to look? I try to look happy. Sorry for the for the E. Do you look happy, sad, or okay? So we have a hand raised.
Yes, that's me, because you have a question.
All righty.
Questions. So Giovanni asks, would teasing count as humor if the person teasing knows that it will affect the receiver? And does that mean that the person has theory of mind issues, or theory of mind? I'm sorry, I added that. Theory of mind, and there are different levels of TOM. So I'm going to start from the first one. So the first one is, would teasing count as humor if the person teasing knows that it will affect the receiver? And if so, does that mean that the person has TOM?
Well, I think teasing is always kind of a double-edged sword, even for those of us with good theory of mind. But I think for most people with autism that I know, teasing makes them paranoid. They think everybody's making fun of them. They don't understand good-natured teasing. So I typically would not do it unless I told a joke and then we practiced it and I knew he understood or she understood what we were talking about. It's often a common thing, especially up in adolescence, that the autistic child thinks everyone's making fun of them. So if they can't hear somebody whispering or telling secrets, which of course happens all the time in middle school, or if they've gotten teased a lot, they will often think that they're making fun of them, even if they're not. So I think teasing is something that is a fine line. You really have to understand the language system of the child, which makes having a social group difficult. Now, they can learn it if they learn idioms, and understand that a group of words can mean something else. That seems to add to provide a framework of things are not always literal. And so the better their idiom knowledge and the better their vocabulary knowledge is, the more likely they are to understand teasing. But I would say for the most part, they don't.
So he has an elaboration to that question. So I will go ahead and ask that one first before the last one that he asked. So he said, to elaborate on my previous question, does that mean that the teaser has cognitive interpersonal skills, since he may be liking how it feels for himself?
Well, certainly one of the ways is, especially in adolescence, that people cope with low self-esteem is by making fun of other people. And, we know that it's an aberrant kind of coping mechanism, but it's something that they do. So in the case of teasing, I think they're not able to do the functional connectivity of the prosody and the teasing and the double word meanings of the teasing if it's good natured. If it's not good natured, it doesn't matter. It's just wrong. and mean. Kids who, as I said before, kids who really understand language do better with teasing, but kids that don't often don't get it. It is related to theory of mind, but remember, theory of mind is really connected with your understanding of language.
Okay, and the last part of his question was, are there different levels of theory of mind?
Oh, certainly there are. It depends on what author you read, but we definitely look at first order theory of mind, which would be what do I think you're thinking, right? Giovanni? So that's first order theory of mind. There's second order theory of mind where do I know what Giovanni thinks of Beatrice, right? So that's second order theory of mind. By the time you get in middle school, every girl in every middle school knows what every boy and every girl think of everybody. That's why the slam books go around that are so awful. But that's them all learning about different perspectives. If you look at it in a more benign way, because when I had teenagers, I wasn't feeling quite so benign. But as I look at it, it's a developmental stage of really understanding many different perspectives and how people socially mix. And then that kind of lays the framework for them in high school to look at perspective debates and different perspectives and arguments and things like that. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question. There are different kinds of complexity in theory of mind, and people have suggested that perhaps it's a language problem and not a theory of mind problem, but you don't see that in all populations. In other words, if I took a population of intellectually disabled kids, I may not see that theory of mind problem as I do with the problem with the functional connectivity, the brain of the autistic child. I hope I answered the question.
So I would suggest, Giovanni, that if you still have questions, you go ahead and pose them, and I will ask them again on the next break for questions.
Absolutely. Okay, was there another question?
Actually, he did. No, he says, oh no, he says, I will. Thank you. Okay, so he'll ask again if he has more questions.
Okay. All right. Thanks for asking. All righty. So we have cognitive, affective, and interpersonal and intrapersonal as our four. So now let's try some things. This is a typical theory of mind tasks. So here we have Sally and it's called the Sally Ann tasks, right? This is Sally's basket. This is Ann's box, right? Sally puts her red ball into her basket. Sally goes out of the room and leaves Ann alone. Ann takes the ball out of the basket and puts it in the box. When Sally comes back, she wants to play with the ball. Where will Sally look for her ball? So those of you that have good theory of mind know that Ann will look for the red ball in the basket because that's where it was when she was in the room with her brain, right? Many autistic children will say it's in the box because that's where it is now. Does that make sense? Okay. So would that be cognitive or affective? So it's not dealing with feelings, right? It's dealing with remembering, and that would be a cognitive problem. Is it intra or interpersonal? So we know it's with another person, so it'd be cognitive intrapersonal theory of mind. Oh, why am I not? I'm not clicking. There we go. Okay, so here's this girl. After a series of unfortunate things, which is kind of like the last week has been around here, she lost her keys, her computer broke, she ran out of gas. The girl just broke down and started to laugh. How do you think she feels? So this is it a cognitive or affective? Well, we have feels right here, so it's affective, and we're talking about another person, right? So we're not talking about intra, we're talking about inter, another personal. I said it wrong the last time on Sally Ann, so it's interpersonal. I'm sorry. So when we're thinking about this, we've all had our times, right? When we have to laugh because we'll cry if we don't, right? But we know when we see that she's really sad because we understand her perspective and her mind. Okay, one more. This is another classic false belief, Smarties task. So there's the box that you usually see Smarties in, which are little candies, those little tiny kind of sweet tarty candies. What do you think is in the box? Smarties. Why don't you open the box and see? Oh, it's pencils. So let's close the box. What do you think your friend Jenny would say is in the box if she saw it? And he's going to say pencils because his theory of mind is what it is now, not what they thought it was in the box, right? So that would be a cognitive issue because we're not talking about feelings, right? And it's interpersonal because we're talking about Jenny. All right. So now let's take theory of mind and look at reading comprehension. How does theory of mind impact reading comprehension? Difficulty with character perspective. That makes sense, right? How did that person feel walking up the hill 105 feet, right? Difficulty understanding what may be important or unimportant in a story related to the character's goals. So, if the whole point of the story was to try and make up the hill and they're talking about the person's clothing, that's not the important point. Many times when you ask autistic children to retell a story, if they have a good memory, they'll retell it verbatim, exactly like what they read. So because it's difficult for them to paraphrase it, use the language, and get the understanding, but they can use it almost like delayed echolalia and parrot it back. So paraphrasing is quite important when we get to intervention. If they can learn to paraphrase and shorten and what's not important in the story. I use a lot of sorting, and we'll talk about that too, where I may have the story and I'll have different things that happen in the story and then different things that are unrelated or tangentially related to the story. And they pick it up and read it and decide whether it goes in the important story or unimportant in the story. This really affects even when they're asked in elementary school, what's a good title for this story, right? Sometimes I give it to them in multiple choice to help them. And then what I'll end up doing is I'll put what they really like. So say they like SpongeBob SquarePants, I'll put that in there along with a boy really needed to get up the hill, because if they're not reading for semantics and they're still thinking it's what they want, they'll put SpongeBob SquarePants in there. So you know if they're really relating to the story that way, it's a good foil. You'll also see that there's difficulty with certain text genre because of the inferencing and the social understanding. Narratives may be more difficult than a factual expository genre. They like usually expository genres better than narratives, except for the narratives that they know that they've heard quite a bit and already know. Trouble with persuasive arguments, debating, and genre requiring multiple perspectives. Why? Because it requires theory of mind. There is some suggestion that comprehension differs according to content, perspective, and experience. So if you're talking about something they know well, like my good friend that loves all things weather, their comprehension is great because they have been thoroughly engaged with weather and their vocabulary is excellent in it. They know a lot about it. So their comprehension in that situation will be much better than if it's something that's not their major focus, right? I had a little guy who loved cell towers, knew all about cell towers. So we used a lot of cell tower things to help him learn all kinds of math, all kinds of things to make it interesting for him. And so he could talk and talk and talk about cell towers. But if we changed it to something else, his comprehension was really, really awful. And there's not a lot of 3-year-olds that want to converse about cell towers, so it didn't make him many friends either. Okay, so here's an intervention preview, which I have already alluded to. The use of the thought bubble helps the child understand the character perspective. So this is also useful in arguments in the classroom or different kinds of discussions in the classroom. Using that thought bubble, Bobby thinks the teacher is right. Susie thinks the teacher made a mistake. So giving them that visual of what's in someone's mind really, really helps them. So if you're using compare and contrast, you can do that with even with animals, and showing their characteristics that are the same and different in a Venn diagram. And then you can use thought bubbles for things that are more feeling and theory of mind. Okay, so any questions about just the general, what is theory of mind? And how does it affect reading comprehension?
No new questions.
All righty. Okay, now we're going to talk about central coherence. Remember, much of the current research lumps central coherence part in executive functioning and part in under inferencing in theory of mind. But what it is how we learn. We put parts of information together to construct a higher level meaning in context. So when you're listening to me, you're thinking, oh, I have a kid like that, or I learned about this in psychology class. I remember that. And that's because you're a great learner. You're spending your time learning, and so you're committed to it, and your brain is naturally putting those pieces together. So it's the ability to process details. Autistic children often have the ability to process details over integrating meaning. And that's what we're talking about with central coherence. And also what we talked about with theory of mind, the ability to know what was important and what was not important, that ability to paraphrase. It refers to the ability to form meaningful links across stimuli and to generalize over a wide range of contexts. I had a child, just a wonderful young man who always did all his homework. He always got things in on time. He was very precise and very organized. And all of a sudden, he never did his homework. When I called his mom to see what's going on, she said, I said, is anything new happening right now? And she said, well, I started a job at a bookstore. And so he comes with me after school and sits and reads books while I work. And so when I talked to him, what I realized, he thought he had to be home for homework. He did not realize he could do homework at the bookstore. And he was so relieved when I said, you know, homework is just work that you're not doing at school. It's something you do outside of class, but it doesn't matter whether you're at the bookstore or at home. And he was so relieved, and the teachers were excited because he started to turn in his work again. So that generalization over a wide range of contexts is really, really important. I always say you haven't really taught anything unless you teach it across people, materials, and contexts, settings. I often get in trouble with speech pathologists that want to write goals inside their little room. It doesn't make any sense unless they can do it out. It's harder to take data, but I don't think that just because he can use a device with me, with my little activity or whatever, that I've taught him to be able to do it in a classroom. It's a good first step, but it's only step 1A, right? So a goal to be fully achieved has to go across settings, materials, and people. It's important to consider both parts of central coherence, the global perception meaning, like the bigger cultural perception meaning, and the contextual sensitivity of, like, how does it mean where we are right here at the football game or at the circus or in the cafeteria. Some now say, as I talked about before, that rather than a local processing problem, it's probably better accounted for by inferencing and socio-emotional content, which is what I was talking about before. So this is the famous cartoon that I think represents central coherence so well. These are blind men seeing an elephant, or blindfolded people seeing an elephant, and they each see the different parts of the elephant, but not the whole to give it the elephant a name. It's all the different parts that they are seeing. So you try it, see if you can get what this means and put it together. And send your guesses under the question thing so we get a few.
So if you are watching this, we really would love to hear, what do you think it is? Please.
Nope. Okay. So it's a box that you see and you hear and has electricity. Now give it a try. Any guesses? You're a quiet group, huh? Okay. It's a television. Right? A box that you see and you hear and has electricity. If I put a box that you hear and has electricity, it might be a radio, right?
Tara did guessed it was a TV.
Ah, yay. Thank you. Either he did, the rest of you didn't care, or
It was at the bottom of the chat, and I was looking at the Q&A, but she did. Oh, sorry.
Got it. Okay. So there is a hypothesis that children with ASD focus on the parts rather than the whole, the elephant versus rope and all of that stuff. The tasks involving information that is local is easier than those tasks that require connections of global knowledge or connections between different stimuli and contexts. And that's that functional connectivity that we talked about. And they talk about it results in hyper-focusing, stimulus over selectivity, and poor text comprehension. And I can remember I was giving a test called the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test. And it's just a receptive language test, point to whatever. And this kiddo had three things that he loved. He loved food, he loved cars, and he loved animals. And so no matter what word I said, he would point to either the car, the food, or the animal, and it was always one of the choices. So of course, that was that hyper-focusing that we got from that. So of course, it was not a valid score. Okay, so there's a controversy about central coherence in ASD. Some studies have showed that people with autism could process globally. And here are some of the explanations. People with autism need to be asked to process globally, but do not do it automatically. And I see this all the time. When I'm teaching homophones, you can, if I just have them read it without telling them anything, then they get most of them wrong. But if I say, there are going to be words in this paragraph, and I talk to them about finding it and looking at the words around it and determine which one it should be, then they can do it and they're successful. It was also suggested that if you have good central coherence, it's the people with high general intellectual ability. I don't know about that. Studies have also shown that the ability is there if specifically asked to think globally, which is kind of the first one that we talked about. Some focus on global knowledge or connections, this study showed, but did not include the context. So again, all of it is showing that theme of today, the functional connectivity. Many now think it's related to complexity more than central coherence. And this author thought that it may be more of an executive functioning issue. Okay, how does central coherence relate to language? So the meaning of words is derived from the context. Getting to work could mean going to your job, or it could mean doing your homework, right? Highly dependent on context. Children with ASD often literally translate language rather than using context to support the meaning. Therefore, figurative language is difficult. I'll never forget, I was giving that end of the year test to a young child. I think he was in kindergarten, and part of it was his body parts. And I said, pour it to your forehead. And he goes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it made perfect sense to him. And all I had to do to teach him it was different was showing him that no, this is the FOU for, and this is the FORE for. Anyway, do we have another question?
We do. We do.
All right.
So Tara states, and I apologize, I was trying to figure out that box and I was distracted, but Tara and Giovanni both got the TV reference. But anyway, Tara asked, As an ESC teacher for fourth graders, comprehension assessments are being given on the computer rather than on paper. It is super hard for some autistic students to zoom out cognitively and see the whole rather than just the parts of the story.
Yes.
Help. This results in them missing the theme.
Yes. So we'll talk about that a lot in intervention parts in the next 2 weeks. Or the next 3 weeks, actually. But one of the things that I always do is give them, walk them through the title and why that's the title, and then give them a synopsis of the stories that I do in class before, like pre-reading, before we read. And then they start thinking in language a little bit more. And I sometimes will draw pictures. Well, I'll show you, we have many things that really help, but that's central coherence for sure. And it's also difficult because they don't spend all their time taking tests on computers like that. And then, some schools don't even have computers for each kid, and they're doing the tests when sometimes they're used to paper and pencil, and it's very difficult. However, we will talk at length about how to deal with those kinds of things. And I'll specifically come up with all the things I think about in thinking more globally when they're taking the tests.
So Dr. Diehl, just wanted to let you, give us a heads up. We're in 30 minutes left, just in case
Okay.
you want to take
Okay,
in
great. Thank
that.
you. I might need to speed up just a little bit. But don't worry, we will get to that. So pragmatic challenges in children with ASD are often because they lack that context of where they are, what they're doing, and all of that kind of stuff. They also are less efficient in determining meaning when there is semantic ambiguity, as we were talking about with the homophones and things like that. All right. So central coherence and reading comprehension, understanding the gist or the main idea, getting that global view, understanding semantic use of ambiguous words in context, integrating information from different sources to form a whole. I had a little guy whose father ran a fish store, and so I thought, oh great, I always had themes, and I thought, okay, we're gonna have tropical, we're gonna have a fish and sea kind of theme. And we got in such a mess because in his mind, his father knew about fish, but nobody else did. So anytime we had a fact about a fish, he wouldn't listen to it. He put his hands in his ears. But it was a great learning experience. He did learn that after a while. Generalization of information is difficulty, and text monitoring, that's self-management of text monitoring. All right. So here's an intervention preview, making connections. Text to self, which would be if, I'm sorry, there it is. For Charlotte's Web, I used to sing Old MacDonald's Farm. I sang Itsy Bitsy Spider. Have I read a book that relates to this book? I once read a comic book about Spider-Man. How does it relate to the world? Spiders live in most places. They like humid places. I saw this on a PBS special. So even in, this was a kindergartner, even at that point, we're talking about the sources and how they made those connections from self to text to the world. All righty, now we're going to move to the last portion of our three mental characteristics, and that is executive function and reading. So executive function is often called the CEO of the brain. So if you were taking a test or at school and you were supposed to use a pencil and the teacher is saying, okay, I want everybody to use a pencil. These are all the thoughts that you're having, but your CEO of your brain are muting all of those, my shoes hurt, or show my work, or the lawnmower is loud outside, or I have to go to the bathroom, and concentrating on use a pencil, not a pen. That kind of screening, both for sensory issues and for content, is often difficult, which is why autistic kids often get so overwhelmed, because everything's coming at them with the same importance. And it's hard for them to push that away and focus on what they're supposed to be focusing on. Okay, so executive function is a really broad term, and it incorporates lots and lots of high order processes. So let's go over some of those. One is the ability to suppress responses, response intervention. You know, the kid goes, ooh, 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 and they just can hardly stand it. They're out of their seat. That kid has a lot of trouble with response inhibition, right? Kids who say exactly what's on their minds, you know, how old are you? Or you look fat in that dress, things like that, right? Those are the ability to suppress responses. So if you'll just take a minute and do what I do, I'm either going to thumbs up or point, right? So do what I do. Easy, right? Now, I want you to see if you can suppress. I want you to do the opposite of what I do. Not so easy, is it? Because you had to suppress your natural intuition, which would be to do the same thing I'm doing, not the opposite. And that's that part of executive function, the ability to tampen down first thing that comes to mind, right? Selective attention. Just what we were talking about, attending to the most important thing in the environment and weeding all that out. Working memory, we've already talked about manipulating information online. So if I say, remember 2, 8, 9, 10, that's just memory. But working memory, if I say the following number backwards, 2, 8, 9, 10. Then I have to remember 2, 8, 9, 10 and be able to go, okay, 10, 9, 8, 2, right? So that's working memory. Flexibility. We all know about flexibility, the ability to change cognitive strategies. So this comes down to even worksheet directions and things like that. So maybe on the top of the sheet, it says underline the important vocabulary words. And on the bottom of the sheet, it says circle the characters. You know, so it's hard for them to go from underlining to circle, right? I had a homeschooled college student at USF who was not taking any of the tests that that the professors were giving him, and so they were referred to me. And when I do that, problem solving is usually recreate the problem and see what happens. And so I got out the little grid sheet and I said, okay, now circle the answers. And he just sat there and sat there and sat there. So I went through the content. He knew it all. And I said, okay, so here it is. You want to just do this. And I modeled it for him. And he said, there are no circles. Those are ovals. And that's why he didn't do it. And it's that kind of flexibility that had tripped him up all those weeks. So you can't take anything for granted. You really have to look. Emotional control, self-regulation. This has to come from the very beginning. Self-regulation is learned. So learning to pay attention, your hearing attention is learned. Learning to wait is learned. You have to learn all that language and all of those things. But if they don't have it, say you have a fourth grader and they don't have good emotional control, it's another lecture. But if you need to, I'll share my email address and I'll be glad to send you more things about self-regulation. The ability to plan and organize, planning ahead, that's very difficult and really is a nemesis of many kids. So when it comes to a project, they don't understand how to put it together, even though they may know all the parts. I had a 12-year-old who was just a brilliant kid, but every morning he was getting in trouble because he couldn't take a shower. And it was that planning that he had problems with. And a simple checklist just fixed it. Monitoring, checking one's behavior and language. We've talked about that. So these abilities are goal direction actions and adaptive responses to novel or complex situations. So those things that I put in asterisks by the research shows is really related to social perspective taking or theory of mind. Okay, reading comprehension. Difficulty with executive functioning is highly interactive with the development of social perspective issues. They may focus on the act of decoding and not connect the reading with meaning. They have difficulty with flexibility in connecting meaning and self-monitoring and self-correction, and of course, repair. So we all make a mistake. Can we go back and repair it? We won't have friends very long if we can't do that, right? Admit you made a mistake and try and repair. Okay, so this is an intervention preview called storyboarding, where for the kid who doesn't get that global thing, I had a first grader, I had a first grader who read a story about Ellis Island, and they were supposed to be able to retell the story, and they were having a terrible time because it was complex. So I really pulled it down. First, they were sad and poor and they lived in Europe. And the second, they go, oh, let's go to America, it's better. And third, they sailed over in ships. And then fourth, it was a long way. Some got sick and they were very hungry. And then finally, they bumped into Ellis Island and they made it to America. And the child did well because he had the overall part of it. It worked. Another way I do this is all in one kind of picture so they can see how it goes. I didn't do that for that particular child because this went because of geography. This went from right to left and he would have trouble not going from left to right. But it gives the overall storyboarding, gives you the overall global process. Okay, 3 truths and a lie. Central coherence is thought to be a part of being able to make a title for the reading passage. Well, that's true. We know that because we already talked about it, that knowing that it's not SpongeBob SquarePants and that it's the boy running up the hill is part of central coherence. Executive functioning plays a major part in the ability of a student to monitor whether or not they're comprehending text or not. I just said that, right? Theory of mind plays a major part in planning a science project. Ding, 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 that's the lie. This would more be an executive functioning problem, planning a science project, right? Theory of mind plays a major part in understanding the character's perspective in a narrative. Absolutely. Oops. I don't know why it's not. Oh, I see. Okay. So I'd like to thank you for your attention and for all you do for kids and for spending all this time listening to me talk. If you could write 3 things from today that helped you understand your students and turn it in for part of your credit, that would be great, because we have to have some kind of learning thing. And then next we'll start intervention 2. And I'm so happy for all of you. If we don't have tickets out the door today, if we're running out of time, do we have time?
No, you still have time.
Okay.
I did want to tell everyone that your next session is next Tuesday, the 22nd. So please be sure to register for that course. If you want to share a little bit about what you will be talking about on your second series presentation.
Okay, hang on just a
Just,
second.
yeah, yes. And I also wanted to let you know that you will be receiving some information from us aside from us thanking you for being here. A thank you email. So then be on the lookout for the survey that will go out. I know this was Beatrice, we agreed you would do that, but you can remind them again or just post the link to the next one as well at the end of this. But be on the lookout for that, and so that we are able to send you the information so that you can submit it to your districts for CEs.
Absolutely. And if I talk about something that you'd like more information in, I'm a professor at heart, so I'll be glad to send you things. Or if you have something that you think would be great to include this, I do these kinds of information giving all the time, so it would really help me. Next time we're talking about strategies that help with genre, we're talking about graphic organizers, priming, KWLH, anaphora, all kinds of interventions, and then we'll continue that for the next lectures. The rest of it is interventions and talking about how to fit it to the child in your class or the children in your class.
Yes. And Tara was asking, where do we want her to turn in your ticket out? And you can do it in the Q&A. That will be fine.
That would be great.
Yeah, yes. And also in the survey that you will receive after this event, you will get a question opportunity to ask further questions. So be sure to ask further questions, but because we might just bring in, if we have enough questions, we might just bring in Dr. Diehl for another event, maybe for us to be able to answer those questions. She would love to be able to personally answer your questions. So even if you're watching this after the fact, be sure to go ahead and post in your questions. We will be making this presentation an on-demand presentation. So if you have colleagues of yours that you know could benefit from this presentation, or you want to watch it again, be sure to be on the lookout for another post on our website where we'll be announcing this presentation and all other ones as well, part of on demand for you to access at your own time for review.
Oh, also, let me just go ahead. I just realized I did not give you my email on the front of it. So let me go ahead and give you my email in case you'd like to email me. My email is sdiehl, D-I-E-H-L, at usa.edu. sdiehl, D-I-E-H-L, at usa.edu.
We have several responses
Great.
for the exit ticket.
Could I just hear one of them before we go?
Yeah. Tiffany, oh, there it is. It's Tiffany's on there. Okay, so first one, Tara says, studies indicate that language deficiencies can affect reading comprehension.
Absolutely.
And Tiffany says, these are her 3 things. On number 1, understanding the theory of mind was something that I heard about but did not fully understand, which was wonderful to get more of an in-depth background for. Number 2, anaphora was another phrase that I did not know about, but it makes perfect sense of how it applies to our students, especially my own son that is on the spectrum. And number 3, story mapping was another that was great.
Great. Well, I hope you really have lots of wonderful things to do next week and that we can share ideas between us too. So thank you so much for everything. You've been just a joy.
Yes,
Can't wait to
thank you, everyone. So we want to first of all thank you, Dr. Diehl, for being here and for committing to education even beyond your what you're expected to do. So thank you again for being here. Janice also answered, and she said, understand why one of my students has a problem with understanding what the title should be and only focuses on part of what he has read. Thank you for sharing that, Janice. And then Tara again added 2 more to her original one. She added students' theory of mind constructs can influence what the students believe, others know, and understand about others' thoughts. And number 3, story mapping provides a good understanding to the student, the sequence of events.
Exactly. Those
Tara.
are wonderful. Well, I'm a happy professor.
Yes. And again, so we encourage you to look out for an email from us from PEPSA, where we are going to be sharing with you the link to the survey so that you can take it for to receive your certificate that you can bring into your district so they can follow their whatever the routine is for them to give you your CEs, but also it's an opportunity for you to ask more questions or suggestions for Dr. Diehl so that she can incorporate it in the rest of the series and or in future trainings. So thank you again, Dr. Diehl. This has been wonderful. We so much look forward to the rest of this training. So if you have any last words to say, please share it.
Thank you for your attention, and I can't wait so you can be really excited about all the
upcoming trainings. Yes.
Things you do for your children. I'm running out of words now.
Yeah, it's late. It's late. Beatrice, did you have anything else to share before we go?
That is all. Thank you all for attending. You'll be redirected to the evaluation right after this ends, and then also be receiving an email from us.
Great.
All right. Thank you so much. And I will look forward to seeing you again next week, the 22nd of October, 2024, if you're watching this later, and from 6 to 8 p.m. So again, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Diehl. Bye-bye.